You wouldn't put a square peg in a round hole, so why would you deploy a traditional firewall in a modern decentralized network? Firewalls have new requirements for businesses leveraging SaaS-based applications and public cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. We're in the cloud generation now, so your firewalls have to be engineered to fit right in. Reclaim your cloud network. Try a Barracuda Cloud Generation Network or application firewall free at barracuda.com/firewalls.
Bring your own guts.
This is the best
Do you hear me?
of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
And welcome to a new week. We have made it to the middle of the month. Is this tax day? I forgot to file. Anyway, I think it's somewhere this week. Anyway, welcome to Monday. Glad you're here. We have a lot to do. Let's get to the headlines. Jimbo Fisher. You remember him? Used to be at FSU, and now he's tearing it up at A&M. He unveiled a new offensive system Aggie fans seem to like. We'll talk later. Down in the swamp, there's a new feeling. Dan Mullen is back in town, and they got that juice back at Florida, according to some of the recruits. We agree. Mizzou, remember them? Okay, no jokes. Mizzou showed glimpses of firepower in the spring game under new OC Derek Dooley. And from AL.com, an article by Matt Zenith and John Talty. A lot of people are yapping about this one today. What really happened between Hugh Freeze, Alabama, and the SEC? You've heard us talk about this story. Hugh Freeze, according to what we had heard, had been told he had the Alabama job, offensive coordinator, and then he didn't have it. According to the article by Matt and John Talty, said five SEC schools in all were talking or wanted to talk more to Hugh Freeze, but the conference advised them against it. There is a bylaw in the SEC that says a school must contact the SEC about any individuals who have a history of major NCAA infractions for a conversation about that individual. But ultimately, even though the article insinuated it was the commissioner's decision, the bylaw states that the institution has the sole authority on hiring personnel. The SEC has no veto. Well, anyway, the article insinuates that it was the SEC commissioner that informed Alabama or suggested Alabama not to hire Hugh Freeze. We know one thing, Hugh Freeze still doesn't have a job. And Nick Saban apparently acquiesced to what was suggested to him by the SEC. We'll talk more about that later on. 855-242-7285 is our number. Who's on today? Ben Baby. Just win, baby. He covers the Aggies. Jordan Rodgers. Cecil Hurt will get his take on what happened to Hugh Freeze, and Andy Staples will get his take on pretty much everything. But first, your phone calls at 855-242-7285. Again, I want to say one more thing about Friday's show. I don't remember a program that we've had more reaction to for what a guest said and did. You may remember J.K. Scott was with us at the very beginning of the program, the outstanding punter who went to the White House last week and prayed with Donald Trump, the president, and then he did the same thing with us here on Friday. Appreciate we've had just thousands of tweets and texts and emails reacting to that. We appreciate all the support. It's on our Finebaum Facebook page now if you somehow miss that conversation. 855-242-7285. That is the number. Let's talk about some of these spring games and some of the news of the weekend. We begin with Matt in San Antonio. What do you say, Matt?
I loved that spring game, Paul. I really did. I was impressed with Jimbo Fisher in the offense. I loved it, Paul.
Looked like what I saw on television, Matt, a record crowd was there.
Oh, yeah, it was a record crowd. I mean, it was a record crowd, and I was honestly impressed with the way the offense looked, the way the defense looked, and I was impressed with the quarterbacks. Jimbo Fisher is doing an amazing job with these quarterbacks and developing them. Jimbo Fisher's doing. I mean, before he got there, the quarterback, Starkel was doing pretty good. Mon was doing not so bad, but ever since he took them underneath his wing, the quarterbacks seem to be getting much better than they were last year, Paul. And I think the defense overall is becoming much more better under our new defensive coordinator than Chavis, the second defensive coordinator.
I tend to agree with you on that.
And I just want to ask you 3 questions, Paul.
Go.
If you had to determine the way the team looked in the spring football game, what would your assessment of it? My first question would be.
Well, let me offer this caveat. You should neither read too much or too little into a spring game. It's an indicator. It's not the conclusion, but I liked what I saw. How about that, Matt?
That's fine. And I guess my second question would be to you, Paul. I like what that Alabama quarterback that was in Graham McElway. I'm not very good at remembering names that well. I like what he said that he said basically they're not too far off from making it to the college football playoff. Yeah, they might not have all the talent Alabama has, but they're not too far off of being.
Let me say this to you, Matt. Jimbo Fisher will get the Aggies to the college football playoff.
Okay, that was my second question.
That's a prediction from right here, right now.
Okay, my third final question to you is, with the quarterbacks, who do you think basically, from either Kellen Moore, Nick Starkel, Connor Boombeck, who has a leg up on that race?
Matt, I'm just not sure that I could make that prediction boldly right now, but we will soon. Not soon, but when the fall comes. Thanks for the call. Do appreciate it. Matt, back-to-back Matts. Matt is in Gainesville. How are you, Matt?
Hey, Paul. How are you?
We are doing great.
I was watching the Braves on Friday, but you just saying that J.K. Scott played with Donald Trump and played on your show, that is awesome. That is awesome. That young man did that with the president and did that on your show. That speaks volumes for him, and no bias aside. That is really cool. I will go back and watch the replay.
Please do. I think it would be worth. I think it would be worth your time.
Yeah, and another thing I was going to tell you, I go to the Gwinnett Stripers games. You probably remember them, the Gwinnett Braves, and I had a lot of Alabama fans coming up to me and telling me to not let you pick on me. And I was like, well, you're an Alabama fan. They're like, yeah, but we like what you bring to the show. So, a couple really nice people out there, 2 Alabama fans and a Tennessee fan. They didn't know who I was, but I said, do you watch Finebaum? And they said, yeah. I said, you know who Matt from Gainesville is? And they're like, no way. And I was like, yep, I'm the idiot from Georgia. But like I said, that's great on that player's behalf, and that speaks volumes of him and his family and his upbringing. You have a good day, Paul, and go Dogs.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We were talking about A&M. I want to bring Ben Baby on here because Ben covers A&M for the Dallas newspaper. Ben, thanks for the time. Before we get to the spring game, we just saw a clip of Johnny Football. What's going on out there? Because there was a time not all that long ago that this university officially wanted nothing to do with Johnny Manziel. Good afternoon.
Yeah, first, thanks for having me, Paul. Always good being with you here. It's kind of crazy to see the 180 that's happened with Johnny. I think as Johnny's kind of rehabbed himself, not only from a literal rehab standpoint, but when you talk about his social image and kind of the way that he's viewed around the country, I think he's a little bit more. I think now it's not as much of a risk to be associated with a guy like Johnny. And Jimbo made it a point to have these alumni come back, and a lot of people, like, when kids get their offers from A&M, they still will post pictures of Johnny Manziel. He's still a very prominent figure. So I think it's something A&M definitely wants to cash in on. And now I think it's to a point where you're not going to have the backlash that you would have when he was with the Browns or just out of the league because of all the issues that he had to deal with.
Was that a top-down mandate from the administration? Because, you could feel it everywhere and anywhere that hey, we don't want anything to do with this guy?
That's a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that, but I would not be shocked if that was the case. I think that like A&M had a kid, one of their top draft prospects for the upcoming year, defensive tackle Zaycoven Henderson, was arrested on a suspicion of a felony gun charge.
Yeah, we heard from his dad one day. Right.
Oh, you did. That's interesting. Yeah. No. So he was not allowed at A&M's pro day. However, he was at the A&M spring game. And nothing has really changed with the case except for the fact that it's more, the longer it kind of drags on, the longer it seems like the Brazos County DA might not prosecute it because they still haven't done anything with it yet. So, I think it just goes on a case-by-case basis, but I think that's how it goes for everybody. I think as long as it's not worth the public risk or whatever backlash that may ensue, I think people are willing to take waivers on things that might be a little risky.
Okay, so great crowd, great feeling coming out of there, a lot of optimism. You're an objective reporter. You're not a fan. What do you think, and what did you see?
Well, first off, I appreciate the objectivity shout-out. That's always nice to hear. I thought that we're going to talk about the quarterbacks. I think that's the number one deal. Nick Starkel started out really well, and then, and Kellen Mond admittedly said that he was sloppy to start out, but then as the scrimmage progressed, it kind of flipped, and Mond looked a little better at the end than Starkel did, and Mond drove his team back down to win. I think it was kind of vintage Kellen and what he showed as a freshman, that he'll make a couple throws that are really, really impressive. The big thing for him, and something that we're not going to be able to see in a spring game, is can he do it consistently whenever a defense is really keying in and forcing A&M to throw the ball? Because we don't know what A&M's offensive line is going to look like. It didn't look all that impressive in the spring game, and we don't know if it's going to be any better in 2018. And so if A&M can't run the ball well and their teams are still going to make A&M beat them with the pass, then, it'll definitely change the way the defenses approach the Aggies. So, right now, like if I had to pick a starter, I would pick Nick Starkel. I think he'd be the guy, but it's honestly a lot closer than I thought it would be going into the spring game.
You've been around this program, and I realize Jimbo's here, the contract, all the hullabaloo, but beyond that, what else did you sense and feel from the spring, especially what you saw on Saturday? It seems like there's more of you can definitely feel that Jimbo does things a certain way, and it's almost completely different than the way Kevin Sumlin did it. The guys throughout the spring, you hear the comment that if something goes wrong at practice, you were going to hear about it immediately from a coach. And it was almost to insinuate that wasn't like that with the old staff, that there's a lot more attention to detail. The practice is a little tougher. And, Jimbo's going to be out there in your face if you're messing things up. And I think that's one of the things that, maybe A&M needed. It's definitely a shift in culture. Whether that's good or bad and actually translate to success, we're not going to know until the fall. But I think that's something the players definitely had to get used to because, it's definitely not the way that someone ran things. And so I think the spring was good for them to kind of get adjusted for that and get a feel for what it's going to be like in the fall because, I think you're going to see more of the same where you're going to see Jimbo and his coaching staff really on the players and demand nothing but the best rep in and rep out at practice. And you don't know if it was always the case under the Sumlin era. Ben, we know what the chancellor said, and we know what the contract reads, but in terms of this year, what are realistic expectations?
I think right now, looking at what they have, I would think a 9-win season would be a really good year for A&M because you've got Alabama and Clemson within a 2-week span in September. You would have to imagine both those are losses. And then when you look at, the SEC West and kind of where things sit, you still think that, until they can prove they can beat LSU, I think you still have to give that one to LSU. And then, I think Mississippi State and Auburn are still very good programs, especially Mississippi State, even though they lost Dan Mullen over the offseason. So, I think 9, if they lost to Clemson, Alabama, and then only lost to one other team the rest of the way, I think that'd be a heck of a year for Jimbo in his first year. I think I've got him at 8 wins. I think that would be pretty solid. I think right now, you want to just get the building blocks and get everything squared away so that you can make a run.
Hold on one second. And if we could leave this, for those watching on TV, I want to leave this on the screen for a second. You said 8 wins, realistic, right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I'm gonna go down the schedule because this is really interesting. Clemson at Alabama. Those are the 2 treacherous games of the first half of the season. It would, there's also Arkansas and Kentucky, but just for the sake of argument, we'll say you're right about that. That leaves you with 2 more losses the rest of the way to get to 8 wins. Here's the schedule. At South Carolina, at Mississippi State, at Auburn, and then Ole Miss at home and LSU at home. So I'm going to say there are 4 games there that the Aggies could either be an underdog or close to an even pick. Of those 4, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, and at Auburn and LSU, what's going to happen in those 4 games? You got to win 2 of them, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, man, that's tough. It's honestly the same predicament that we were in last season, trying to pick, because I could have conceivably had A&M at 4-8 or 8-4 at the end of the year, and they ended up at 7-5.
Okay, but let's do it this way: South Carolina, win or loss.
I'll take a win. I'll take a win. A&M has a
so you will win. The Aggies will go on the road October 13th and beat South Carolina. Okay, at Mississippi State on the 27th.
Oh, I think they win that one because they're coming off a bye.
I'll repeat again what I just got through saying. The Aggies will go on the road I feel like a game show host, on October 27th at Mississippi State. So therefore, you're going to say that at Auburn and LSU could be losses, or at Auburn, then maybe the LSU game could be the 9th win, right?
Yeah, I think so. Man,
wow.
I was not expecting to be put on the spot, but you are. No, it sounds about right. I think when you go back and look at it, I think you're 100% correct, and those games could go either.
Well, and I'm not trying to marry you to this. I just think it's, it's easy to say. I'm not picking on you, man. It's easy to say 8 wins, but I'm just trying to figure out how to get to 8 or 9 wins.
No, it's tough. And honestly, we were like I said, the same predicament last year, and you're just playing the odds that a couple of those coin flip games go A&M's way. And I mean, last year A&M was a couple possessions away from winning 5 games instead of 7.
Can you tell me though, Ben, as a veteran of the SEC, why you would think A&M is going to be able to go on the road at South Carolina or Mississippi State and win?
I think. South Carolina, A&M's been able to beat them since they've entered the conference. I think that would, right now, with the way I'm going, I think that the traditions hold. I think A&M still beats South Carolina. I think they still lose to LSU. Now, that could be flipped. They might lose to South Carolina.
Okay, we know all that. We know all that. It's April.
Right. So, I think...
Okay, and what about Mississippi State, which brings back Nick Fitzgerald, which brings back the guts of last year's team? You think the same is true there, right?
I think so, and A&M's defensive front's gotten a lot. I think A&M's defensive front's going to be a lot better than people realize, and I think if they're able to stop the run better than they have in recent years, and I think Mike Elko is going to be, I think Mike Elko could have the defense looking better than it did under John Chavis.
Okay.
As crazy as that might sound. So yeah, I think those are reasons to pick A&M if you're going to do so.
Is your phone number listed?
I hope not.
Okay, I just wanted, because we're getting a lot of calls from Starkville and Columbia, South Carolina, wanting to talk to you. Hey, Ben, it's always fun. Thanks for being here, as always. We will talk to you soon. And the Starkville Quarterback Club would like you to speak tonight, because there are a couple of pies that they would like to hit you with. Thanks for the call, Ben.
No problem. If I get any angry mentions or phone calls, I'll be sure to send them your way.
Please do. Good stuff. And again, I'm not picking on Ben. But I just think people are selling South Carolina and Mississippi State short. Now I realize I'm the one that just gave the vote of confidence for Jimbo Fisher, but I think you have to try to separate tradition, what's happened in the past, versus what's going on today.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a thrill.
Don is up next in Iowa. How are you, Don?
Hello.
Always love a call, the enthusiasm. Don, one more time. How are you? Hello. I just heard myself come back. It's like you're speaking into a seashell. Thank you, Don. Always a pleasure. Come back soon. You hear? How about Greg in Alabama? How are you, Greg?
I'm doing well, Paul. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
In reference to the possibility of Texas A&M making the playoffs in 10 years, I think that's doable.
Yeah,
but
very doable.
The question it remains to be seen is, do they have a dependable running back, and can their defense step up in ways that it hasn't in the last, since they've been in the SEC? They've had some really good.
But Greg, as you know, 10 years is a lifetime.
Sure. And
it's very likely, I hope Alabama fans will turn the radio down. This is post-Saban.
Yes, it will be post-Saban. And there's no guarantee as an Alabama fan that Alabama will win another championship. There are no guarantees.
There are no guarantees in life.
Exactly.
Well, there are a few. There are a few. I know. The guys in the booth know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Now, at what point in the 10 years of this contract do fans start to chafe at A&M if he doesn't make it to the playoffs?
Yeah, and by the way, Greg, a 10-year contract, you know what that really means? It's a 5-year contract.
Exactly.
Because after 5 years, if they're 7-5, they're the same rich fat cats from the oil rigs and the oil wells who gave Jimbo the money will say, Jimbo, we really appreciate you coming, but what's it going to take to get you out of here?
Exactly. So I think, in theory, it's possible, maybe even likely.
We're more than happy to pay you the remainder and give you some to leave today. And you can take the 10-gallon hat with you, buddy. Now get out of here.
I thought the other interesting thing that you guys showed at the intro was the story about Hugh Freeze. And
oh, my goodness. Is that a crazy story or what?
It is. And not only that, Commissioner Sankey would go that far to talk to Nick Saban, but that there were quite a few SC teams that wanted,
I think we know LSU was another one. Missouri is reportedly one of the schools. And listen, I mean, you could, who knows exactly what happened in that conversation, but I'm guessing that for anyone who wants to say the SEC shouldn't have done it or Nick Saban shouldn't have done it, this is really a bad look for? It's a bad look for Hugh Freeze.
Yes.
It means that reasonable people who care about the integrity of a 14-school institution took a look at Hugh Freeze and said, you know what? We don't want this cat around. That's how I read it. Maybe I read it wrong.
No, I agree with you.
And why wouldn't you want Hugh Freeze around? Forget what Hugh Freeze has been saying or selling. Okay, the guys involved in sanctions, which you can quibble about to the end of time. That's one look. And even though this should not have anything to do with it, the other look is personal misconduct. How are you going to overcome that? Now, by the way, I realize we're talking about something that's relevant to the issue and something that's not, but the combination, it's bad.
You're exactly right. I think my hope is, this is not in regards to Hugh, but that Commissioner Sankey maintains this tack consistently, especially in the basketball arena.
Well, Greg, it's a tough one. There's always been a relationship between the SEC office and schools. I remember a case years ago, a specific school wanted to bring in a player of some ill repute, and the commissioner let it be known that he really didn't think it was a good idea. Legally, they could. They did, and it turned out to have a bad ending. So, there is a give and take. I don't believe that the SEC would tell Nick Saban, you absolutely, we forbid you from doing this. It's ultimately the school's decision. But maybe they said, listen, are you aware of this? Are you aware of that? Is this really what you want to do? And I don't know how that really works. I wish somebody would come out and discuss it. It would be fascinating. But in the end, before everyone wants to throw rocks at various people, the person that has to look himself in the mirror is Hugh Freeze.
You're right. And I don't know. I mean, we weren't privy to the conversations that Nick had with Sankey or with Hugh Freeze.
No.
And just going based off what the story says, he really wanted him, and I guess he was willing.
Well, I can tell you, Greg, and I'm sure you listen to the show enough. I said it at the time that Hugh Freeze had the job, And the next day he didn't have the job. Hugh Freeze went over to Tuscaloosa. He felt like he had been. He felt like the job was his, and then it was yanked out from under him. And it's still somewhat of a mystery how that went down. Well, maybe Cecil Hurt can enlighten us in about an hour. But this reporting today on AL.com is the closest I've seen to getting to the bottom of it.
Well, it's an interesting story, and hopefully we will know more. And I appreciate you taking my call. And have
Always.
a great day.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Next, you're holding up the line, ma'am.
What did you say?
You're next in line for the water slide, ma'am. Feet forward and enjoy the ride.
Okay, dearie, this does look fun. Whee-oh, you melted me. I've melted.
The Wicked Witch of the West on a water slide? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
See what you've done. Oh!
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Let's roll the headlines here and share with you what we'll be talking about next. The NCAA has a new rule, alteration to the football kickoff rule approved. Football kickoff rule altered to show the receiving team to fair catch a kick inside the 25-yard line and have it result in a touchback. Saban, smart. What about it?
They'll tell you, the rules committee, that's why they do what they do. They have like statistics on it. They keep it. I mean, it's a long-term. Concussions are a little bit higher. There's a little more injury there, so they're trying to make the game safer. We don't go down and practice kickoff full speed live ever. I mean, it's dangerous because you got guys running 40 yards into each other. So we don't ever do that. But you know, as far as the rule, if they say that it's safer, then I'm obviously in support of safety. I mean, I think anything you can do to make players safer, it's a wise decision.
I would have liked to seen a different solution. I understand the reason, and I respect the reason, which is player safety. But I guess that takes some of the strategy out of the game, you know, to me, with the result that we had. And you would have got the same result if we'd have just moved it up 5 yards, because almost everybody in college football would have kicked nothing but touchbacks. And you still would have had all the strategies that you could have used in other circumstances.
Yeah, it's been a long time since Nick Saban has actually liked a new rule, but I tend to think he may be onto something here. What is this rule accomplishing? That is the question. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285. A lot of guests to come. We've already had a few. Let's check out Blair. Blair, how's Mom?
Good.
Blair's in Maine, for those of you who are driving around.
Yep. And it's raining outside.
It's raining in Maine. Let the rain in Spain. No, that's Maine. That's Spain.
I'd rather have rain, Paul. Rain and meatloaf coming from the sky.
Sounds like, remember, you ever heard that song, Weekend in New England?
No, I haven't. Have you ever seen meatballs coming from the sky with rain?
I've seen Lucy in the sky with diamonds, though.
I'm just making crap.
Don't remember much about it, but I would, one night,
okay.
That's all I could see.
The reason I called was...
Barry Manilow was the author of Weekend in New England.
Paul, are you okay with the slide that happened in the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox game?
Blair, I don't know how to break this to you, but I start paying attention to Major League Baseball in October.
Oh, okay.
What month is it, Blair?
It's only... See, God, I'm bad with the months.
Unlike people in New England, we have gotten above 30 degrees. Not by much, I might add. Yeah. It's going to be about 30 tonight here where the spring just will not start, but we're still a little closer to spring than you are in Bangor.
No, I'm not in Bangor. I'm in Demerskata, Maine.
It took me a long time to learn how to pronounce that.
Demerskata,
I didn't realize it was Bangor.
I'm in Demerskata, Maine, Paul.
So where are you? Are you on the northern part or southern part?
Mom, are we on the southern or northern? Yeah. Well,
hey,
we are right here.
Can we get some meatloaf?
What? West Coast.
We want
it now!
Hey, Blair.
Well, the meatloaf is not around right now. We don't have any on the table.
So, Blair, what's Mom up to today? Canasta game or what?
My mom's reading a book.
What book?
Knitting. That's what she does. Knit or
Call the Wild by Jack London? It's kind of your part of the world, isn't it?
Paul.
Yeah, Jack.
Paul.
Yeah, Blair.
Paul Finebaum.
Yeah.
On television, she goes.
What was your favorite book growing up, Blair?
I don't like to read. What I like to do is sit at home, watch sports, watch the extra innings, and I like to also play the MLB.
Blair, I didn't ask you what you like to do as an adult. I asked you what your favorite book growing up was.
I don't remember reading, really.
You've never read a book in your life?
What book did I read when I was young, Mom? This is on.
Dick
This is on the
Spot,
TV.
remember
I'm
that book?
live.
What's the name of that book?
No one is interested in this. Even my mom just said that, Paul.
What'd your mom say?
No one's interested in it, and she's looking right at you on the TV. No one's interested in it, and I'm looking straight at you. No one's
Hi,
interested
Mom.
in it.
Send money.
Mom, he wants money. How much money?
How much you got?
How much do you have? He's right there. Talk to him at the TV. He's right
I'll take your U.S. savings bonds, okay?
Hey, we'll send you a credit card, okay? Love you, Paul.
Okay, Blair, thanks. I'll let you spend the rest of the night with Mom. I would advise him reading, speaking of Mom, a little bit of Freud. Starts with an O, Oedipus.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Jordan Rodgers was at the game, did it for television. And Jordan, thank you for your time. We've been talking about the spring game. We saw bits and pieces of it. You saw the whole thing. Thanks for being here and tell us what you saw.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul. Interesting case here. I was excited to get down to Gainesville to check out this Dan Mullen Florida football team. Just off the top, they're not devoid of talent. They have talent all over the football field, especially in the skill positions. Some of the guys are still trying to get eligible at receiver. And Van Jefferson and Trey Grimes, the running back depth chart is loaded. I think the biggest question mark is really the offensive line. Can they come together and find a front five that work together as a cohesive group? And then the reason Dan Mullen was brought to Gainesville was to get a quarterback. Get one and or develop one that they have in their back pocket to compete for SEC championships. And right now, the talent, that's still a question mark. I think Felipe Franks has a lot to build off of from an arm strength standpoint, from an athleticism standpoint. I thought Kyle Trask had maybe the best spring day or spring scrimmage at the spring game there, completing balls downfield. But the biggest question mark in that backfield, to me, I think Dan Mullen put this as good as anybody. This team has talent. They don't have confidence right now. This is a team that, before the start of last year, had some of their star players suspended throughout the year. They had, towards the end of the year, they had their coach fired. This is a proud program. They expected to win at Florida. They did not do that. And I think they're a little shell-shocked still from last year and the disappointment that it was. And the leadership group and the confidence has not risen to the point where they're able to step past that at this point. So I think that's what Dan Mullen and this coaching staff needs to do, is build confidence in these young players. Find some leaders. Find a quarterback that can take this team and run with it, because the talent is there, but right now they're just not playing like a team.
So we saw three quarterbacks in the game. Of course, we all know about the highly regarded freshman coming in. I mean, that is your position. With what you've seen, heard, been able to cobble it together, how would you rate the quarterback race coming up here in the fall?
Yeah, Paul, I think it's wide open. I think one of the best things that Mullen did early on in spring practice is he opened up a couple of the spring practices to the fans. And now when you have a five-star quarterback like Emory Jones come in, and you've had a quarterback position that's been struggling as of recent, or really since Tebow at Florida, you're kind of banging the table for the five-star to get some playing time. Well, he's just not there yet. He's got a ton of talent. But if you watch practice, he is miles behind Felipe Franks and Kyle Trask as far as running this offense consistently completing balls downfield. Now, does he flash skill? Absolutely. Does he have a higher ceiling than those guys? He might, but he's not ready to play just yet. I think their best option is still going to be either Felipe Franks or Kyle Trask. I think the biggest strides will be made from now until August 4th when camp opens. But I will say, kind of really pressing Dan Mullen about this position, I think we're going to see Felipe Franks be the starter, and I'm just guessing here. I didn't get told anything. I think we're going to see Felipe Franks be the starter. I think we're going to see him run the football a lot more than maybe he expected, maybe we've seen in the past. As we asked Mullen about developing Felipe as a passer, he said, well, sometimes you got to build confidence through his strengths. Right now, his strength is running the football. He can flash his arm strength. He can make some big throws downfield. But until that confidence starts to catch up to the development of his passing game, he's the best option running the football from the quarterback position. He's big. He's more athletic than I think we give him credit for. I think we're going to see an offense that utilizes Felipe Franks differently than we saw last year and more so as a runner.
Jordan, what did the other side of the ball, the defense, of course, look like to you?
Oh, it's interesting. I got a chance to play against Todd Grantham, so I know that defense well. I know his track record at Mississippi State, taking them from a worse than 100th defense to top 15 at times in the country. He's a really good coach, and they're going to have a facade, at least, of a complex defense. What I mean by that is they base out of the front three, and that fourth guy who was like a Montez Sweat last year, who we saw rack up a ton of sacks, is going to be that fourth rusher they're going to move around. So the most interesting piece of this Florida defense right now, I think, is Jabari Zuniga. His athleticism and ability to be that Montez Sweat type athlete, to be a linebacker, but more a pass rusher off the edge. They'll move, they'll walk him around. This is going to be a defense we're going to see bring a lot of pressure. Now, of course, if you watch the game, you don't really see that in spring because the defensive coordinators are somewhat handcuffed, and that's by design. You want these offenses to do well. You don't want to be bringing blitzes from the corner and knocking out young quarterbacks, so that's understandable. This defense is going to be much improved. They're very talented in the back end. I think a guy like Zuniga is a guy to keep your eye on as someone that could really flash and become a household name sooner than later.
Finally, Jordan, it becomes almost cliche this time of the year to start trying to figure out where will this team settle in terms of a record, but you have a better clue than we do. We get asked about it every day. I mean, what does this team look like? Are they we know they're probably a bowl team, but how high is the ceiling?
Yeah, right now, and just this is my opinion, but just getting the temperature of this coaching staff, I don't think they're overly confident in what they have right now. Now, that's not just Florida. That's any new coaching staff that's really rebuilding these guys from the ground up and focusing on fundamentals more so than offensive scheme and teaching them how to actually be a team. If the offensive line comes together, they can be talented on offense. But still, you got Georgia getting better. I think you have Kentucky that returns almost everybody on defense that's going to be much improved. You have a Missouri team in the East that can put points up on anybody. I think this team, if they get to 8 wins, they're going to be super happy with the trajectory that this Florida team is on. This is not going to be a turnaround like I think we might see at Texas A&M, where I think Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher's new staff is ready to win now. Florida, I think, is about a year away, but that doesn't mean we can't see them get 7 or 8 wins and be a team that we start to see on the rise towards the end of the year.
Jordan Rodgers, just off of his call of the spring game down in Gainesville. Jordan, thanks so much. We will talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Paul. Good to chat.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a flip.
Larry is up next.
What's going on, Jack? Woo! Hey, check it out. What's up? I hear Jeff from Chicago trying to overtalk my man. You know, he don't listen. The boy don't listen. It's Bama fever, brother. They get it in their head. They can't get it out. It's if we win, it don't matter. So we play the same. Everybody plays the schedule a year, and then they play for national championship. We won. Woo-hoo! And that's the way it is. And if you don't like it, find soccer or something. But Mark Kubiak is pushing your buttons, man. He's going after you, Paul.
Well, what about it, Mark?
Whose buttons am I pushing?
You're pushing his buttons, Jack.
Sounds like your buttons are getting pushed, Larry. Yeah.
No, you are. You're trying to go after Paul like making changing things. Like he said this, didn't say. He knows what he says, and what he says is always right. And you're always wrong. You're just like that guy that reminds me of Tom. Hey, Tom, from up north. You know, the Yankee Doodle guy.
Your favorite, Tom from Cleveland. Where's Tom been?
Tom sounds just like that other Yankee. He sounds like y'all.
Larry, what do you have against Yankees?
All y'all sound like me.
What do you got against Yankees?
What?
So what do you got against Yankees?
I just way you talk, man. How would you in a crowded room at a party and people talking like y'all talk? Hey, guys, you understand? If somebody called my name, I wouldn't know who said it because y'all sound the same.
So, Larry, do I understand? So you don't like Yankees, right?
I despise them, and I'll tell you something else. That moon is going to turn green April 20th, and that's a sign. You know what that moon turns green for? It means you ain't. The moon turned green at 420 years.
I thought the
April
moon turned
20th.
green, then the cheese is not ripe.
No, it's the Yankees. The Notre Dame, it's a sign that Notre Dame won't win another national championship for another 420.
Okay, Yankee Doodle, thanks for the call.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Jeff is up next, not the Jeff from Chicago, the Jeff from Columbus, Ohio.
What's going on, Paul?
How are you, Jeff?
Hey, I'm doing real good. This is a great show tonight. You need to tell Larry and Shelby it's Patriot Day in Boston, but it's Yankee Day on the Paul Finebaum Show today, brother. I mean, the Yankees are coming in strong, and it's amazing to me, Paul, and I know you've got to deal with this all the time, but with all the success the SEC and especially Alabama has had the last, 5-10 years, why is everybody so sensitive down there when we bring in some facts and comments? You know, y'all get so, sensitive down there. I just don't get it. Why is that? Can you explain that to me?
It's a Southern thing, Jeff.
I mean, Jeff from Chicago, I thought had some facts, Paul. I thought he kind of had you boxed into a corner a little bit when you said Ohio State has basically a game-and-a-half schedule this year. I mean, you know that's not right. You know, and Jeff was coming in.
Okay, Jeff. Allow me to correct myself, okay?
Okay, correct.
I want to do a public mea culpa. I did say Ohio State had a game-and-a-half season, and I have found out the errors of my ways. So please accept my apology. I'll repeat it this time for the cameras. Ohio State does not have a game-and-a-half season. Ohio State has a game and three-quarters season.
So what are you doing, giving John's Penn State three-quarters? Or I mean, you're not even giving us a full game for beating Penn State over there?
You Buckeyes, you had that win over Alabama in 2014. You were able to use that to your benefit. And since then, it's all gone wrong. Alabama has won 2 titles, probably should have had 3. You guys,
and I give you full credit for that, Paul.
You guys up there are you're no longer content beating up the piñata, better known as Jim Harbaugh. So here's what you want to do, Jeff. You got your big boy pants on, and you want to go over to the big playground and start a fight with the SEC. Well, let me tell you, it won't work. I mean,
Paul,
you're so defensive. Chicago, now Columbus, Ohio. We're just having fun with you guys up there. Relax. I realize it's April. What is it? 16? 16. It's April 16th in Columbus or Chicago. It's still 12 degrees, and you're wearing your parkers and your caps and your gloves. Whatever you're wearing, who cares?
Yeah, but Paul, why
don't worry about the facts here, Mark. I mean, and you're whining and you're crying, and we're just having fun down here because we sit out in the sun, we go to the beach, we have a good time. And you guys, I mean, what did Ohio State do last year? during the season. Can you help me, educate me,
We discussed that over and over, Paul. Yeah. And I've told you, if
you took the gas pipe is what happened, Jeff. You have a chance against Wisconsin, a bunch of slow guys, and you let them get the better of you in the second half, so you sat out the party while Alabama and Georgia slow danced on January 8th. I don't remember what the question was.
You asked me the question. I was going to answer like I honestly have. But when Jeff had you pinned into the corner, you go to that lame Big Ten network, call them. That's weak, man.
No, it's not. It's not, Jeff. Jeff, it's not weak because
especially when you were wrong about our schedule. You were wrong,
Jeff. Who cares? Okay.
Why are you guys so sensitive about when people come in?
See, Jeff, the difference between us and you is that we have a forum down here where you can discuss things. We let you in. We invite you. We try to make you feel comfortable, and all you do is come into our party screaming about why you didn't get a good invitation. I mean, you're visiting. I mean, you're not really part of this family. You're visiting. You stayed 2 nights. You want to stay 4 nights, and we're tossing you out. Okay, it's Sunday night. You're going home. Thank you. Thanks. Rich is from Atlanta.
Jack, can somebody tell the Jabroni Jeff brothers that the Howard Stern channel is further down the dial?
Oh, my goodness. I made a simple statement. Hey, Rich, I may have been wrong, but I can tell between the two of us, I'll never apologize.
Wouldn't it be great if the Jabroni Jeff brothers had a show on the Big Ten Network?
The Big Ten work is truly missing out for an opportunity.
Yeah.
The crying. Remember that movie, The Crying Game?
Oh, yeah. Hey, Jack, speaking of the Big Ten Network, can you explain? I don't totally understand what happened. Now, Comcast dropped them in the non-Big Ten footprint. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what were the reasons, and could that ever happen in the SEC network?
Well, I'll give you a broad view, Rich. I think when you have good programming, national cable companies like to have you on regardless of where you are. So I couldn't answer the question about the SEC network. That would be out of my pay grade, as they like to say.
Right. Okay.
I know one thing. If the Jabroni brothers are on the show any more than they've been today, we probably will get canceled nationwide.
Yeah, I would call them. I would definitely call them. They're hilarious. Hey, the Alabama schedule question that Jabroni Jeff was talking about. who was number one in the playoff seeding? Who was the number one team in the country?
Well, that would have been Clemson last year.
What happened to Clemson?
They got waxed by Alabama.
Who was number 2 in the playoff seeding?
That would be the Sooners from Okie Land.
No, you sure it wasn't UGA?
I'm not positive, but I think it was Oklahoma.
Okay. All right. Well, Oklahoma, which is fine, which was a great team last year.
We'll double check on that, but I think it was Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, what happened to UGA in the championship game?
Well, they won. Well, they beat Oklahoma.
Okay, and then what happened? What was next?
Well, then they lost to the number 4 team.
Okay, Alabama. So Alabama beat the number 1 and the number 3 team in the country. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, there you go for your roll tide, Jack. Thanks, buddy.
Listen, I don't. I made a statement just for fact. I mean, not for fact. I was responding to a caller. I think Ohio State's schedule is okay. It's not great. We're talking about non-conference. We're not talking about in the conference because we really don't know how that's going to pan out. I've said repeatedly, I don't think Alabama has a great schedule. I don't know how many more times I have to say that. But listen, we've heard from Chicago. We've heard from Columbus. Where else? Detroit. Are you watching today? Who else is? Where other Midwestern city would be snowed under right now? Muncie, Indiana. I mean, I'm not making. I mean, I'm sorry. We like to have fun down here in the South.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We showed you a headline earlier about this article with Hugh Freeze. We'll get to that in a second, but we want to talk about that with Cecil Hurd. But Cecil, it has been too long. Welcome to the program. Hope all is well.
Everything's going well, Paul. Thank you.
Glad to hear. Before we get to one of the subjects that we want to talk about, let's get an update on the not so dramatic quarterback battle between Tua and Jalen Hurts. What is Tua's condition right now?
Well, he's apparently re-injured the hand that he had injured earlier in the spring. We don't have a further update as to how much he'll participate. They'll practice again tomorrow, so we'll see if he's out there. And then we talked to Nick Saban on Thursday. This is the second one, and again, without having seen the X-rays, without having any, medical scoop, I don't know that he would play in A-Day with a second hand injury. Just you don't want some walk on with a lot of adrenaline to cause a problem. Come flying into the backfield and bang into that hand again. So I would be surprised. And so it really hasn't been a, quote unquote battle this spring because I don't think Tua's really, he hurt the hand originally in the first practice of the spring. So I don't know that he's been 100% throwing the football in any of the practices. So it's something that Nick Saban wasn't going to declare a starting quarterback in the spring anyway, but it's something that'll wait through the summer and probably into the last part of August.
Cecil, based on what you've heard, and again, I realize there's not much you can see, but when we talk to you, we know you're plugged in more than anyone else. What are you sensing on how Jalen has played and the little we have seen of Tua? I realize we won't have a resolution, but what if anything has changed?
Well, Jalen's obviously gotten a lot of work, a lot of reps. He has a new quarterback coach in Dan Enos. The latest word from Nick Saban was that he's continuing to improve, which makes me think he's probably still not the passer that Tua is. Obviously, he's great at running the football. They're different guys. Jalen has a lot of experience, and it's a luxury to have somebody with that kind of experience coming back, regardless of whether it's as a starter or whether the other guy wins the job. So that's where they are right now. I just think there's so much buzz and electricity around Tua because the last college football any of us saw was him completing a touchdown pass to win the national championship. That's aside from the usual, as you know, the starting quarterback at Alabama is the second most recognizable name in the state behind the head coach at Alabama. So, setting that aside, Tua was just such a sensation in January. But there's been a lot of interest and probably a little disappointment that he hadn't been able to compete at 100% in spring training.
I realize we're concentrating, Cecil, on the QB situation, but overall, this team, a lot of shoes to fill, offensively and defensively. What is your assessment?
Well, there's a lot of injuries too this spring, not just Tua. Jerry Jeudy is out. Terrell Shavers, another one of the top receivers, is out. Anthony Jennings, who was such a big part of Alabama's win over Clemson on the defensive line, hadn't participated at all this spring, so there's been some of that. Nobody, as you know, Paul, nobody's going to believe anybody who sits here and complains about, well, Alabama doesn't have any depth, they're out of players. That's not the situation. But they are thinner than they have been in the past at some positions. They don't have the depth at linebacker. They needed tremendous depth at linebacker just to make it through the year. Last season, they don't have that this year. They're very inexperienced in the secondary. I think the defense was a little better in this last scrimmage, although they had to go indoors because the weather was so bad here on Saturday. So we'll see what happens at A-Day, but there are some questions. Now, again, do I expect anybody around the
the country in your audience has a whole lot of sympathy for the problems on Alabama's roster? No, I don't.
And I realize the schedule is somewhat subjective, but when it was made, maybe Louisville looked like a power with Lamar Jackson, but they don't anymore. Help me better understand the schedule. There's only so much you can control, but from a distance, it looks like a really bad schedule, Cecil.
Well, they can be hard to judge. Everybody thought that last year's opener with Florida State, you remember the pregame hype and that it would be the game of the year, and it didn't turn out to be that way, and Florida State really didn't turn out to be much of a schedule boost. But you can't control your conference rotation, who you play. They don't play Georgia, who's the obvious favorite in the East, unless they should play in the postseason. So you don't control that. They do control the non-conference portion of the schedule. They probably thought Louisville would be a better matchup than maybe it looks like it will be with Lamar Jackson gone. So they're not going to have a lot of margin for error. They certainly do get some benefit of the doubt because of the success that they've had from select doors. I think that's a true statement, but people are going to look at that, and people are going to say, hey, if they don't have that kind of quality win, unless if they go undefeated, as you know, an undefeated SEC champion is fine, but that would involve beating the East champion in the last game. But the 12 regular season games, Auburn will be a good game. Texas A&M feels good about themselves, but there's not going to be any marquee level games until very late in the schedule, if then.
Finally, there was a story that came out earlier today about a subject that you're very familiar with, and that was the attempt by Nick Saban to hire Hugh Freeze. A lot of people thought it was a done deal. Freeze was telling people he thought he had the job, and then he didn't have the job. The story on AL.com suggested, according to sources, that the SEC played a role in this. The SEC has a bylaw which gives them consultation but not jurisdiction. Can you add anything to this story?
Well, I think it was not just at Alabama.
Well, yeah, it included 4 other schools, but we're concerned about Alabama.
Right. So I think that Nick would like to have made that move, but received word that it would not. I don't know if they have absolute veto power. I suppose they did if it came to that, but as you know, they try to handle these things between the league office and all the institutions quietly. So I think that Greg Sankey was conscious of the situation and what the public perception would be, and at least wanted to wait 1 year. Whether that was pleasing to Coach Freeze's representative, I don't know. I get the sense that perhaps it was not.
Does it or does it not shoot to smithereens a theory that Nick Saban is the most powerful man in college football and can get anything done he wants if he couldn't even hire Hugh Freeze?
Well, this isn't the first time that the SEC office has overruled what Nick Saban wanted to do. If you remember the Maury Smith situation, the SEC office didn't really back him up in that situation either. So Nick Saban is a powerful person, but is he more powerful than a conference commissioner? No, I don't think so.
We'll leave it at that. Cecil, thank you very much for your time. Always good to talk to you.
Okay, Paul. Good to talk to you.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Put a little cherry on the top.
Welcome back. Andy Staples joining us. Always great to catch up with Andy, who well-known writer, does his own show. Andy, we were talking before you came on about the craziness of college football now, where you have a quarterback battle pretty much on every corner. It doesn't matter where you are. The Clemson situation, Alabama's been hashed out. We saw what happened at Georgia last year. We may see it again this year. What's going on here?
It's amazing. I think it's a combination of these quarterbacks playing year-round 7-on-7 and getting a lot of private instruction and coming in ready to play, and then it being a much harder position than it used to be, so therefore much harder to hold on to, because think about it, in these offenses where you basically you want a dual-threat type quarterback or your quarterback run as part of it, I mean, you're putting so much of the offense on that kid, and it's hard to be good enough to withstand the pressure day after day, month after month, year after year. So you could have a good season like Kelly Bryant and Jalen Hurts did. And then all of a sudden, you could lose your job. And I don't think anybody would be surprised if Tua won the job at Alabama. And I don't think anybody would be surprised if Trevor Lawrence or Hunter Johnson won the job at Clemson.
No, it is pretty amazing. Well, let me start with you in the place where you live. It's kind of hard to get a handle on that quarterback situation, but you live down there. Tell us what Dan Mullen has meant to that school, and how do you think ultimately it's going to work out?
Well, there is a different energy around the program now, and I think one of the ideas that Dan Mullen and Scott Strickland, the AD, had is let's try to make this a little bit fun, because Florida football hasn't been a whole heck of a lot of fun really since the year before Urban Meyer's last year. And I think if you asked Urban Meyer, the 2009 year when they were really good still wasn't a whole heck of a lot of fun. And it just seems like everything's been way too serious. And you saw a spring game on Saturday where Dan Mullen didn't take himself too seriously. The team didn't take itself too seriously. It looked like the fans were having a good time. Now, the question is, does that translate into wins in the fall? We'll have to see. I mean, I think combined with that, they're doing some stuff in the weight room. Their strength program under Jim McElwain was not that great. And I don't ever want to slip into the cliche of, the last strength coach did this and it was like a curves, and the new strength coach, though, he's having them chew iron bars and taking them out to the ocean, and they're dragging boats everywhere and hovercraft. That's not exactly what's going on. But this is a little more modern strength program than what they had before. So they are seeing some gains there. And I think more than anything, the vibe is different, which they need. But it doesn't mean they've solved the quarterback quandary, because it's basically probably Felipe Franks or Kyle Trask. I mean, Emory Jones, you're asking an awful lot of a true freshman to come in and play Dan Mullen's offense. He'll tell you it's not a super simple offense. It's not one that is designed for a true freshman to come in and take over. You look at the guys who started at Mississippi State, they developed to where they were. And, Felipe Franks probably got thrown in there a year before he should have played. And the question now is, can you reel that back in? And I'm curious to see, Paul, what they do. Do they go out on the grad transfer market? Because there's an intriguing situation in Columbus, Ohio. So Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins are up for that job of the starting quarterback at Ohio State. We all know that Urban Meyer's offense and Dan Mullen's offense are fairly similar. Joe Burrow is going to graduate in May. Urban Meyer has said he owes Joe Burrow a decision. Now, if you've watched, you're pretty sure Dwayne Haskins has the edge in that competition. So if Joe Burrow suddenly comes available, I wonder if Florida will go after him. I imagine there'll be quite a market for his services, because he might be the best quarterback on the grad transfer market this year. But I'd be curious to see, because, while the offense is kind of veered a little bit differently when Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen split up, the DNA is still very much the same.
We were talking a minute ago about Clemson, and that's all we're hearing in terms of Trevor Lawrence. Are you hearing the same thing in terms of, we saw a little bit of it, but there's more to a quarterback battle at a major competitor for the national championship than just what we saw in the spring game or see in the spring game?
Well, I think that's the thing. The spring game and the way it played out is probably going to give people an idea that the competition's a little different than it is. Kelly Bryant has been doing just fine in that competition. It just so happened that in the spring game, you see Trevor Lawrence throw a 50-yard touchdown pass to T. Higgins, and then you turn around and Kelly Bryant misses 2 wide open guys in the next series. And because that very limited window is all that we've got to see, we assume, oh, well, that must mean Bryant is fading and Trevor Lawrence is ascendant. Well, there were 14 other practices, and I know Kelly Bryant had a lot of good ones. So I think this is a lot less cut and dry than anybody thinks, and I think Dabo Swinney is a very loyal person, and I think he's going to give Kelly Bryant every chance to keep that job.
Before we get to the Hugh Freeze situation, what's the latest?
Double secret probation?
Yeah. What have you heard on Shea Patterson's availability for Michigan?
We'll find out when the NCAA decides. This is kind of in the NCAA's hands. You know, you've had Shea Patterson and Thomas Mars present their case. Ole Miss has presented its version of the story. And, you know, Ole Miss can't block Shea Patterson. They can simply say, hey, we don't agree with his version of the story. And that's what happened. So we'll see what the NCAA decides on that. I think it's an interesting situation because I worry that there's a lot of folks that are fans of Michigan that think, oh, if Shea Patterson is ruled eligible immediately, then this is going to be great. Michigan's going to be awesome. Don't put all that on him because, remember, if Shea Patterson come back to Ole Miss, he would have been in a very tight competition with Jordan Ta'amu, and he might not have won it. And he's a very good quarterback, but he's also the same quarterback who started against Alabama last year. What did they lose, 66-3? So in the Big Ten East, you're going to face teams that maybe not quite the talent level of Alabama, but Ohio State's awfully close. Penn State's awfully close. Michigan State's really good. And their defense is always good. So if he's eligible to play immediately, I hope they don't decide he's going to be the savior of the program, because I'm sure their coaches aren't looking at it that way. And I imagine even if he can play immediately, he's not going to be slotted in there as the starter. He's got to beat out Brandon Peters. He's got to beat out Dylan McCaffrey. So that's a little less cut and dried situation than people think. It's not just, oh, he's eligible, he's the starter. It's not that bad. And the other thing is, if he's not eligible, it's not the end of the world for Michigan. Honestly, it doesn't really matter who plays quarterback for them if their offensive line doesn't get better. They've not really been able to establish a run game in the last few years. They've not protected the quarterback very well. They've got Ed Warner now, who was the offensive line coach for some very good Ohio State teams and some very good Notre Dame teams. He hopefully will get them blocking better, and then whoever plays quarterback will benefit from that.
Before you go, the story came out earlier, things that everyone has heard for months now, that Hugh Freeze was on his way to Tuscaloosa. It was something mysteriously happened, and the other schools tried to hire him. The report said that the SEC was consulted. There's a bylaw that gives the SEC the right or is necessary to consult them on major infractions cases. The bylaw states they don't have the final say, but we all know that Hugh Freeze is not working right now. Your take on this rather bizarre story?
I just call it double secret probation. It's the same deal Chip Kelly had to go through when Florida was going after him. He had to kind of make his case to Greg Sankey, and it wasn't like he had to really refresh Greg Sankey on the case, because in Chip Kelly's case, Sankey was actually on the committee on infractions for Kelly's Oregon case. So he knew all the deal, how it worked, and so Kelly said, hey, here's what I've done, here's what happened, here's my version of it. And given the fact that Florida offered them the job, you'd think the commissioner gave the blessing. Now, nobody will confirm that, but I don't think Florida would have offered him the job otherwise. With Hugh Freeze, it's double secret probation, basically. That they can't stop these schools from hiring Hugh Freeze, but the question is, are you going to go up against the commissioner and hire him? Is it worth the fight? And what you saw is it's not. Now, I do think Hugh Freeze will get a chance to work again pretty soon, because let's look at what happened. What he ultimately got fired for at Ole Miss was not the NCAA stuff. It was the other stuff. And while that is very hurtful to his family and hurtful to himself, it's not an Art Briles situation. I think it's more akin to what Bobby Petrino was doing at Arkansas, and Bobby Petrino's been hired as a head coach twice since then. So I think somebody's going to give Hugh Freeze a chance. Now, the question is, will it be somebody in the SEC? I don't know, because if they're still getting kind of the shake of the head or the high sign. No, don't hire this guy. I don't know how that works. Now he has a 2-game suspension from the NCAA. But essentially, got hit with failure to monitor with that head coach accountability legislation, which says you're supposed to know what your underlings are doing. So I think he can make the case that, look, at the end of 2018, the suspension I was supposed to serve, that's already gone because the suspension, you could hire him after November 30th, 2018, and he didn't have to serve a suspension as a head coach. So I think somebody's going to give him a chance. I just don't know if it's going to be in the SEC. Maybe it's an ACC school or a Big 12 school or a school in the American. But the fact of the matter is, when you beat Alabama twice, when your offense gives Nick Saban fits, somebody's going to try to hire you. This is, again, it's not an Art Briles situation. More similar to Bobby Petrino, and Bobby Petrino is gainfully employed last I checked.
He sure is. Andy, always great information. We really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast. The Paul Finebaum Show airs weekdays on the SEC Network, beginning at 3 Eastern.